So Shahab, dodging a bullet, would you characterize that way? And what are the ramifications for the dollar-yuan exchange?
Well, I think based on the 2015 Act that refers to currency manipulation, it would have been difficult to name China a manipulator. That's a fairly quantifiable set of criteria which weren't being met. Now, there's a 1988 Act as well that's much more vague. It would have been possible potentially in the context of that one to call China a manipulator because that one is so vague. But the bottom line is that would have been seen for what it is, which is at this point another escalation, maybe unwarranted escalation in terms of US pressure on China. At a time when everyone's waiting for the G20 meetings in Argentina at the end of November, where there's some hopes of a Trump-Xi meeting. So in that context, I think it's prudent that the US didn't take this step at this point in time and leave it as something that can be used down the line if necessary.
So in the meantime, where's the yuan going? Because, I mean, we keep bumping up against that 7, that magic 7 number.
Yes, and the reality is the renminbi has not strengthened on the back of China not being called a currency manipulator. You've actually seen Chinese equities trade poorly again overnight as well. So we're in an environment where really the domestic environment is not great at this point in time, given that they're not prepared to turn on the taps to offset any problems coming externally from the US side. And you're seeing a market that's truly concerned about things like where investment onshore in China is going in the years ahead. We have Q3 GDP numbers up ahead from China, and there's worries around that, how weak that's going to be anyway. So the fact is that the local conditions in China combined with the still uncertain environment externally that the US is creating is still enough at this point to keep the currency under pressure. And the simple fact that we're beyond this specific threat of the report doesn't take any of that away at this point.
What was interesting to me, I actually wasn't surprised that the yuan was lower, because I feel like there's also a narrative in the market that because they weren't labeled a manipulator, they can then stop having to prop it up. They can let it free fall a little bit. Is that part of the story?
It could be, but to be honest with you, I think this specific report, although it's interesting, maybe some of the issues around it have been overplayed at this point in time. I think clearly the more important issue from my perspective is the fact that whatever seems to happen to US equities, every day Chinese equities go down, and it doesn't seem to make any difference really what anybody says or what hopes people are trying to create. They just keep going lower. And while that's the case, the market will perceive the currency in China as something that just has to keep falling. Now again, this issue of the manipulation report was there as something to talk about, but I don't think the underlying trend is being determined by these issues. I think ultimately we have to look at what onshore conditions are doing, and they're still pointing to a weakening economy, and therefore the currency will keep wanting to fall in China.